All right. Boom, boom. Showtime. Welcome. Welcome to the show. Been quite the week, eh? Man, tell you what. Alright, we'll get that new outline up there for you so people can check it out. Feel free to check in tonight, folks. Say something. Of course I'll be talking, but man, this is just kind of weird. So part of the reason this show, by the way, welcome anybody who wants to drop in. This is Escaping Dystopia. My name is Roy. I am your host. Sorry. I don't know. It's a show of sorts. I have been not keeping up with the web post, but we'll get there. So one of the big reasons that I started this program was because I saw an administration coming in that really wanted to change the way the U.S. does things. And I want to avoid it. And this last week, you saw a big part of the danger of having this kind of leadership in power. So we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. That's kind of the whole talking white supremacy, our president. Various arguments, common bullshit, and ways to respond to it. Some of the other what to do, we'll talk about that after I go through that whole piece. A little bit of the white victim plan, which is kind of this part of this... from a political perspective on why would they be doing this? It doesn't make any sense. If that's what you're asking, that's what that section of this program tonight will talk about. North Korea backs down, so it looks like last week was the whole nuclear war tweets. This week he's different tweets. No, it does look like they did. We'll talk about that just a little bit, and some of the other stuff around that, what it cost us. A little bit about the kind of the popular abandonment of the president after this last week, which has been heartening. We'll talk about that some more. And then a little bit about the danger that we're going to face now because of the isolation. But that is part of that white victim plan that we'll talk about. So, welcome to the show, everybody. It's good to be here. Good to be here. We have a president of the United States who has a real problem condemning white supremacists unequivocally. And this is the first time in, I think, my life that we've really kind of seen this much kind of open reluctance on the part of Republicans, especially the president, to go directly after this kind of mindset. That being said, part of the statement that we saw him read reluctantly was actually not that horrible, but the context of it within the other ones puts out a really confusing tone. And that's one of the things that a lot of real political watchers are condemning, because this isn't something that you should really be confusing about. This is one of those things where the people who want to get him support, this is where you have the David Dukes and the Daily Stormer and all the your white supremacist groups and those people, they have heard certain messages coming out. Other people have heard others. People who don't follow politics or follow this at all have heard other messages. Part of the idea of putting out confusing and contradictory messages is a political ploy from the White House. It gives them the cover to say, look, we did this. Can we move on? Why are you still picking on us? That kind of thing. There's a couple conversations. A friend of mine on the Facebook, one of my Facebook friends, posited something about this. And this is a little bit, we'll talk about this more in the white victim thing, but I wanted to do this and read some talking points that came out today, because this is how they're trying to work this. This is my friend Brad Kramer. He might, I don't know if he's listening. He's on there. I share his stuff all the time. This is a public post, so I'll read a little bit out of it. And it's because there's some polls that came out that show that the overwhelming condemnation of or even that kind of outrage of like, what? Wait, the president didn't what? He said what? This is kind of a poll about, a majority, let's see, from what you've heard, seen about the protests and events in Charlottesville this past weekend, do you feel President Trump's response to the violence in Charlottesville has been strong enough, not strong enough, or unsure? And overall, you've got about 27 with strong enough, and about 52% with not strong enough, and 21% not sure. Republicans, of course, there's a majority, about 59%, right, saying strong enough. So most Republicans think this is covered. When you get to the independents, and this is kind of what the point of it is, it's split about, 30 for strong enough. It's actually pretty close to even on strong enough and not strong enough and unsure. If you're unsure, then that's, you don't really care about it, which means that it's strong enough. There wasn't a failure. So you have about half the people who don't care about this stuff kind of split. And so anyway, to bring you to that, I gives you kind of the background for this. Is only half of the country thinks that Trump's response to white supremacists and Nazis was inadequate. Lots of mainstream Republicans and Republican leaders criticize him. This is true, calling his response inadequate. He says, I think most people have this sense the Republican mainstream and its policy agenda reflect a wider cultural mainstream, that what Trump's brought to the party with his candidacy and his embrace of white nationalism is an elevation of the fringe, right? And my friend's argument here is that's not true, that most of the Republican policies that they actually pursue, healthcare, on taxes, Social Security, Medicare, LGBT rights, they're not popular, but the white nationalism is, and it's much more popular than what any of us want to believe. And I think this is true. The immigration debate that a lot of the Trump brought is not, he's particularly unpopular. When people think about some of the concepts of it, they don't like them, but it doesn't really affect them in a negative way for the most part, because they're not feeling as if they're these other people who this affects in an extremely negative way. So he goes on, Trump's bigoted agenda on immigration, on law enforcement, on drug policy, on police brutality, and on the nature of American culture is in the American mainstream. And I agree with that. That's the thing why, it's always a part of us, right? It's always there, that impulse that just smash it, just kill them, just beat it, just end it, just, cut to the chase kind of impulse. And we have kind of those negative, judgmental impulses about other people all the time. I have another friend of mine who's great. He's hilarious. But he wants to, destroy the entire family of anybody who cuts him off in traffic, or he lets in and they don't wave to him. Now, of course, he's joking, and that's pretty funny. But, I mean, those kind of impulses we have, and actually, if he saw this, he'd probably say, no, I'm serious. They should burn. Burn! Because you gotta wave, man. Just say thanks. It's not that hard. So this impulse in this group of people is out there, and so when they have that leader and that direction, that's where it gets dangerous, and that's why directly why I'm trying to do this kind of stuff, right? And continue these conversations and keep them going, and both of them talk about politics and all this, because it does, and it's this impulse is deep, and it's in our country. It's all around us. I know that I could walk. When I walk around my neighborhood, I know I walk by a house of somebody who probably agrees with everything Trump has said so far on this, right? That's not uncommon to think so. So what I think, and this is part of what they kind of set up with the political argument here, and I'll tell you, and this is why, and it comes out in these GOP talking points. Let me read you this. This is pretty wild. I have these interlude music. Here we go. So this is what they're trying to get all the rest of the Republicans to say, and this is, again, I talked about this a little bit. There's a fight going over for control of the Republican Party, and it's going to be the base of it, which is this kind of group that sees nothing wrong with what the president's done over the last few days, versus the rest of it. And that's what they're trying to consolidate, and that's where these talking points come out. let me read you some of these. This is like in talking points sent to GOP members of Congress on Tuesday and obtained by the Atlantic White House Communication Office, now run by Hope Hicks, who's 28, by the way, urges Republicans to cast Trump's message as one of unity and argue that the president did, in fact, unequivocally condemn racism. And this is a quote. It says, you should make the point that the president was entirely correct. Both sides of the violence in Charlottesville acted inappropriately and bear some responsibility. And also goes, the president condemned with no ambiguity the hate groups fueled by bigotry and racism over the weekend, and did so by name yesterday. But for the media, it will never be enough. The continued just media attacks on this are really a big part of this as well. They want to set up this narrative, again, that they're building that, he apologized. He already came out and said this. What do you want him to do? Dance and tear down George Washington's statue? It's the media attacking him. There's stuff in here. They didn't put all of them. I got the wrong story. I should have got one. But it's pretty wild. Let me see here. There we go. There. Oh, no. Sorry. Momentary thing. I had it up on my phone. That's one of the problems I have is a lot of the stuff I do is researched on my phone, but it's got the best camera, right, for this stuff, so I use it for that, so I can't, be like, oh, well, let me just, look that up. Let's see if I can find this real quick. There's that one that I already had. Here we go. This is great because they've got most of them on this thing. These are where it gets a little wacky, and this is where I wanted to, because they didn't have the really wacky ones in the Hill. But, let's see. This is one of their points that they want people to make. The president was entirely correct. Despite the criticism, the president reaffirmed some of our most important founding principles. We are equal in the eyes of our Creator, under the law, and equal under the Constitution, the memo said. It says the White House claimed that Trump has been a voice for unity and calm throughout this, right? Let's see. We should not overlook facts just because the media finds them convenient. From cop killing and violence at political rallies to shooting at congressmen at a practice baseball game, extremists on the left have engaged in terrible acts of violence. Now this is from their talking points that the White House is trying to bring out and turn this again into this just mushy fight of both sides are bad, blah, blah, blah. And the idea here is that they're going to have their 20%, 25% of the country that they have Trump as their true hero and savior. And that is what they're counting on being just this unmovable block of voters. And then you take that unmovable block and then you add to it a good portion of this mushy middle that doesn't really care about all this stuff or what down comes to it. People who are, at this point undecided, much less will poll undecided, next summer and then right before the election. People who won't vote in midterms, right? Midterm voting turnout is like 10, 15%, 20. I don't know what it is nationally. I need to look that up. It's ridiculously low. And if you have 20% of the populace that can't wait to vote for your agenda again, you can run the table pretty easily in a lot of elections because of the low turnout. And that's what really kind of kills it. But the other side of this, and I did want to cover this real quick because it's been interesting to see them try and paint their enemies, so many enemies for the White House. But this group, the Antifa, which I think they're kind of hilarious. But the idea here, and I'll have a link up to it again, is pretty straightforward. The idea that these ideas that are coming forth from the white supremacists and from these neo-Nazis and from a lot of the alt-right are odious and have been tried before in history, and we've seen the results. And because of that, they are worthy of resistance, immediate and forceful resistance. So there's some of their justification for violence that I don't necessarily agree with, and there's a good example of that. Like the Confederate statues coming down, right? Like I'm all for them coming down. I think that a lot of cases they absolutely do not need to be there. The reason that a lot of them were put up was as symbols of oppression, literally. That was like the time that they were put up. So there's no reason to keep those there. But there is a way to do this correctly, and that's not just tying a line to it and pulling them down. That's not how we do stuff here in this country. And so when you have that kind of level of things, and I saw the video of that, and people like kicking the statue after it was down, and that was that's not. That's, if you want me to draw a line where I think this is now crossed over into a little bit silly, that's probably part of it. The violence that we saw this last week is just, I think, the start of what we're going to see. The longer that he's in the White House, the longer and worse that it's gonna get. You'll have this initial resistance now where people are pushing back and they can't have this rally or that rally. It's completely self-defeating for them. That's exactly the point. And this is actually, somebody else made this point too. Just ask them to explain themselves. They're very good, and I talk to these people actually a lot, and especially a lot of the pretty whacked out Trump supporters, and asking them to explain themselves is literally like it's their Antifa. No, I mean that's the antidote to them, is just having explained why do you want to do this and do that. And so much of, especially the support from the alt-right people, is just being against other things. There's not something that they're actually for or care about in particular. It's so much of their ideology is just, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to talk like you want. Not going to blah, blah, blah. So it's going to fall apart. The resistance is growing. The danger, of course, is, like I said, with that mushy middle that doesn't care, and then there's a big event that blows all of this stuff away. And that's where you have the danger, because the middle will side with authority in the event of danger, without question. So the safety isn't in low poll numbers, it's in resignation. I think. So how do you do that, right? And this is kind of moving on a little bit. I do think the only way that he's going to go out is he's not going to be impeached by this Congress. So there's 2018 for the elections, right? Definitely think the House can be taken back. That doesn't really get the impeachment going too good, because the impeachment's in the Senate. But that would allow a lot more investigations and really pretty much hamper things. And then taking the Senate as well would hopefully protect the Supreme Court. So that's kind of the hope, I think, from the election side. If things get really, really wacky, I do think like mass protests in Washington, D.C. until they go away, a la various other countries that have done this, is definitely on the table. And I think anybody who can hear me should get together their protest survival bag and be ready to go spend a week or longer someplace and set up, the ability to do that. And I think that happens where, right, he leaves the White House for a certain amount of time, and then enough people come to D.C. that he can't get back into it and stay there long enough that it, we're not leaving until you leave, kind of thing. That's kind of from the protest side. And I do think everybody should go to any marches that they can, especially now, because I think we need to get out and continue showing that energy and why. But this last week, it really sheared away even more of the moderates. But those are only the moderates that are paying attention. The rest of them, and this is moving on to the next topic, is really about the white victim plan and setting up this core white group of just couldn't possibly thinking about voting for those Democrats as the core GOP, like the Trump Republicans. and making that group be big enough to totally control the party and totally decide who gets to win and where they get to go. That's the longer term plan, and that's why you're having this fight for the whole rhinos and the hardcore media change. Because there's a chance now, because nobody really likes Republicans either. So that's why Trump can trash that brand, because it's not his brand. He doesn't care about it. He has his own brand. Like, if people hate Republicans, that does nothing but really kind of help him. And we see them as ineffective, but him not. Hence, that's why some of the infighting that you see a little bit of some of the activists cheer about, but I don't know that so much to be cheering about at this point, because the person who's going to win that fight is the single person who has the loudest voice. That's the one with the bully puppet in the White House. So we saw that North Korea back down. They're not going to try and do their Guam targeting for the moment. Let's see what else this happens. It's actually it'll be curious to see if they pop up during another crisis. What cost us, as I mentioned a couple last weeks, was the South China Sea. So that'll probably be a bigger problem a little bit further down the road, as now there's kind of that. This ties into the pulling out of the TPP and stepping away from Asia and allowing China to then define a lot of the rules that are going to define a large part of the next century. Which will be interesting, because a lot of that century is going to be really influenced by the climate change. Where the U.S. is on that as an outside of the globe leader, we're gonna. There's a danger that if this goes on for too long, we will realign the map and we will be isolated enough that Russia becomes an attractive ally as one of the only ones who actually talk to us. And how horrible is that? That's when we're gone. I won't let it get that far. And neither will a lot of the CEOs. And this is one of the other things, a point of positivity from the week, because, again, while most Republicans didn't find fault with the president's response, most people did. And when you get to the point of a lot of the people on his manufacturers council and all this, the reason why they were there is because they're large, influential people in charge of large, powerful companies who have lots and lots and lots of customers. So this whole general public thing matters a lot. When you have lots and lots of customers, 20, 30% that are like, no, this is horrible, that's you can't keep doing that. And so they kind of all realized they were being used. They didn't really get together. They didn't do anything. So if you're not getting any benefit and there's a cost, you're out. So they all tried to quit, and Trump fired everybody. And that's, again, just goes to the complete and utter pettiness of this guy who claims to be a president. Just the whole, you can't quit, you're fired, I'm taking my ball, going home, I didn't need you guys anyway. The literal tweet where they were fired, I guess, was, instead of trying to put pressure on you, I'm just going to get rid of you all. Which is, again, just, how does that even make any sense? With a lot of his core supporters, though, and remember, at this point, the core is so hard that any kind of, well, why is he doing that? Well, why are you still picking on him? Picking on him all the time. Guys, stop picking on him. Stop picking on him. I'd be interested to see what happens if the pressure kind of comes off of him for a little bit. Which kind of, I think, moves us to our last piece. Look at that segue business, man. He's very, very isolated now. This has been a recurring theme for his mental state. There's some undercurrents of, he's totally losing it, like really losing it in Washington. So we'll see how that goes. But there is a danger, of course, with the isolation that we have more and dangerous saber rattling, and somebody actually tries to, really go at it. And our response is just so off kilter that it causes, again, the whole cascading cycle of events that seems so much more likely now when you have this kind of poor leadership. And we see from this last week, and I'm going to wrap this up and call it a thing, but we see this last week how much leadership matters and how different it is for us as a nation when we deal with a lot of these issues that we have from our past as we move to a future, and having a wise and just aware leader, and the difference between that and this just buffoon who's running things now, and how he just blunders through it all, and it's just not good for anybody. But this too shall pass. We're not near any points of no return just yet. More people are seeing it. More people are speaking up. I think calm and steady conversation is the way to go still at this point, because we're so far away from an election, and it's not time to freak out unless you're really ready to freak out and just call it, revolution time, which is, I think, for the effective revolution time is, almost got the bug. The effective revolution is going to be the one where the sit-in one, not the try and take on the army one, because that's not a good idea. So we shall see how it goes. But that was quite the week on that side. A lot of the things that I've been talking about for a while, and kind of started this whole thing to do for kind of happen a little bit more, and you kind of see a little bit more of the White House exposed on that angle, where they do have, if they wanted to be serious about the response to white supremacy and all that, they would have fired Bannon. He would be gone, because his ties to that group and in those groups is unquestioned. And then, again, that this came after the week where you had one of his other alt-right advisors, Stephen Miller, going off about how the Statue of Liberty, they put that poem on there later. Nobody cares about that crap. It's just, there's big and heavy dangers. But it's, it's still good, man. It's not like we've got, horrible cancer. Can't joke, sorry. I have a friend of mine who's kicking ass on that. And she's still watching. Good job. You're a badass. It's great to see friends kick some cancer ass. It's a big thing. And it's interesting to see the way the social media shows the lives of some of our friends and others. Indeed, with the politics talk, why some people decide to cut you out and all that. Maybe we'll talk about that some other time, but it's an interesting way that things go, So anyway, peace out. Matty Mo, what's up? So it's fun enough just to do this, to see the random people who accidentally click on the thing, and they're like, "Oh shit, he knows." It's all good. You guys have a great week. I'll be here next week or sometime later. We're gonna go do. All right, how about this? All right, we'll make a deal. Some of you may know, may not know, I'm a pantheist, so I do actually kind of occasionally speak to God, as it were. God, if Trump is a complete and utter buffoon, show us some sign in the next week. I don't know, blot out the sun. And then we'll know that he's just a fool beyond reason. You're too sweet, sweetheart. You're too sweet. It's all this camera, I'm telling you. It's fucking awesome. Give my boy Flav some love from me. He wouldn't let me make out with him last time, so you're going to have to do it for me. But anyway, so we got the eclipse going, so the world might end, so we might not have a show next week. Science says otherwise. Says these things happen more often than you'd think, but not across the entire U.S. as often as you might like. So we're going to go camping up in Yellowstone. Missing the GP. Oh, I had a scheduling conflict. I'm not going to go into it. So I'll see you next week if the world's still here, right? Which with this guy in office, who knows? It's better to laugh at it. It makes it hurt less. Trust me on that one. And with that, saying good night. Good to see you, Jen. I'm glad to see you. It's always good to see you, folks. Peace out. Love y'all.